Okay, our application is a bit too sprightly. I can click around and everything seems to be very quick as I'm browsing around the application. And like I said earlier, yeah, that's great, but not realistic. So let's take a look at adding loading spinners into our application. And the package I'm going to use is called NGX Spinner. So if we take a look at the NPM documentation for this, and as I'm recording the updates list course, it's finally had an update, literally 3 days ago. Now at the time I'm recording this updates list course, we're about 1 or 2 weeks away from Angular 18, and a mere 3 days ago this was updated for Angular 17. So when we're using these third-party packages, sometimes it can be quite a while until they are updated for the latest version of Angular. And because Angular insists on producing a major update every 6 months, then this can happen. But if we take a look at the compatibility, well, now we've got Angular 17 support. I was still prepared to use this even though it wasn't updated to Angular 17, by the way. It does install fine, it does work fine, even if we were using this one on Angular 17. That's what I tested it with, so we should be good to go for sure on version 17. And if we go and take a look at the GitHub repository, and do make a habit of doing this, please, when you're using Angular, because you will find it helpful to see if what you're about to use is going to be compatible with the version of Angular that you are using. So if we take a look at the package.json and take a look at its dependencies, then perhaps there is cause for some small concern here, because if we look at Angular animations, then this has the carrots, which means it is going to be compatible with Angular 17.3, 0.4, 17.5, 17.6, etc. Because the caret means the major version has to be 17, but the minor version can change. It can be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the patch version can be whatever. But when we see a tilde, as in Angular Common, then that means if Angular 17.4, which isn't going to happen because it's very late in Angular 17, there will not be an Angular 17.4, but this tilde represents the patch number. The last number is allowed to be different. So do be careful with these packages and do come inside and take a look at their dependencies to give yourself some confidence that what you're about to use is going to work. Now, when it comes to things like this, just a loading spinner which just uses CSS to display a spinner on our page, then we can typically 99 times out of 100 get away with using one that is not actually yet updated for the latest version of Angular. I imagine because this was just published 3 days ago, it's going to be a few months before Angular 18, which is around the corner, gets the latest version of this. But anyway, we can use this, and let's take a look at the installation. And we do have different options, and regardless of the fact that we've got the ng-add, which uses Angular schematics, I have almost as much success rate with this, with various packages, as I do with hot reloading in .NET. And I'm just going to ignore that and use the npm install ngx spinner. And go back to VS Code, open up the terminal, find a spare tab, and go ahead and install the npm install ngx spinner. So that goes ahead and installs successfully. And let's head back to the documentation because we've got a few more bits to do. Now, we can use CSS animation files to Angular JSON. Now, there's a whole bunch of different spinners available with this, and this example is using ball scale multiple. But if we go and take a look at the working demo, let's go take a brief look at this, because this is where we're going to find out which type of spinner we're going to use. And if we take a look and start the spinner, then this type is the square jelly box. And if we take a look at the spinner options, then we've got different options that we can select. We can select Pac-Man, and then the type here would be Pac-Man, and we can start the spinner, and as you would expect, it's Pac-Man. And the one that we're going to go for, actually, but feel free to select whichever one you want, but the one I'm going to use is line scale party, and I'm going to start the spinner, and that's the one I'm going to go for. But we need the CSS specifically for that spinner. So when it comes to adding the CSS, then we just need to update what this is to the name of the spinner that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to copy this line, including the .css bit, and head back to VS Code and open up angular.json, and I'm going to add into my array of styles just below the bootstrap ones, and I'm going to add the NGX spinner stuff there, and just update ball scale multiple to line-scale-party. And we also need to add the NGX spinner functionality to our application as well. Now, even though this has been updated for Angular 17, it doesn't look like they've done anything to make it easy for us to use in standalone mode. So we still need to import the NGX spinner module on a application-wide basis because we want to use it from any component. So we're going to effectively add this to our providers in our app config, but there isn't a special provider for this. So let's see how we can use something like this in our app config. And where everything else has this provide, then for things that haven't provided that provider, then we can import providers from and use this functionality that we get from Angular Core. And then in parentheses, I'm just going to say NGX spinner module. And this makes it available to our application as a whole. So now that we have this available, we're going to create a service so that we can start the spinner and stop the spinner. So inside the terminal, let's clear this window. And I'm going to say nggs and underscore services /busy, and I'm going to say skip dash tests. And that is now created. And let's open up our busy service. And inside here, we're going to create a class property called busy request count. And we're going to set that to 0. And we're also going to inject the spinner service, and we're going to say inject, and we use ngx spinner and use the spinner service, and this is going to allow us to start and stop our spinner. And we'll add two methods inside here. We're going to have a busy method, and we're going to say list.busyRequestCount++ to increment it, and then we're going to say list.spinnerService and show the spinner. And the first property is, do we want to give our spinner a name? We don't need that, and we're just going to go for undefined. And then open curly brackets, and we're going to say the type of spinner we're using. And in my case, it's going to be line-scale-party. So if you are using a different one, please just specify whichever one you're using. The BD color, the background display color when the spinner is active, I'm going to set this to, in quotes, RGBA, and then in parentheses, I'm going to say 255, 255, 255, 0, which is effectively no background color. And the color of the spinner, I'm going to set this to, in quotes, hash, and just say all the threes, 33, 33, 33, which is a kind of dark gray color. And below the busy method, I'm going to have an idle method. And inside here, I'm going to say list.busyRequestCount --, and set that class property down to whatever. We can have more than one request going on at the same time. And we'll just do a check of that busy request count. So I'm going to say if this busy request count is less than or equal to 0, just in case our counter has done something weird, then we're just going to take this opportunity to set the busy request count to 0. So we're going to say list.busyRequestCount = 0, and then we'll turn off the spinner. And we'll say list.spinnerService.hide to hide the spinner. Now we're going to control all of this from an interceptor, as that gives us the opportunity, of course, to intercept the requests as they go out and when they come back. So that's an ideal place to have a kind of centralized loading spinner for every HTTP request that goes to our API server. So I'm just going to open up the command line interface once again, and I'm going to say ngg interceptor, and we're going to create this inside our underscore interceptors, and we're going to call this one loading, and we're also going to skip dash tests. And let's go open up the loading interceptor we have just created. So we could do something before the request goes off and when the request comes back. So inside here, effectively, we're going to start our busy service before the request goes, and then when we get the response back, then we can stop our loading spinner. So we need access to our busy service inside here. So I'm going to say const busy service and inject the busy service, and then I'm going to say busy service.busy. And that effectively starts our spinner. And then we get our request, and this is an observable of an HTTP event. So we need to use the pipe method, because at this point we're working with an observable. And then inside here we want to set a delay. So there's a few options for delay, but we want the one from RxJS. So please select the correct one here, and then we can delay by a number of milliseconds. And I'm going to set this to a second. And then we can use the finalize, which is going to happen after the request has come back. And we can use this to turn off our loading spinner. So I'm going to say finalize, and then inside here we're going to say busy service dot idle. So that's the idea. We start the busy service or the loading spinner when our request is about to go out, and as the request is complete and it comes back, then we use the finalize to set that back to idle. And because we've got a new loading interceptor, we need to add this to our interceptors array. So I'm going to open up the app config again, and we're going to add another interceptor to our list. So just after the JWT interceptor, I'm going to say loading interceptor. And quite a few different things we need to do here, but one more thing to go. And we're going to go to our app components template, because we're going to display the spinner at the highest level we can, and our root component is the one we're going to use for this. And inside here we're going to make use of the ngx-spinner, and we'll use that component. And inside here we're going to give it an h3, and we're going to say loading ... And we need to import this component to use it, and there's no quick fix available here. So I'm going to open up the app component.ts, and inside our imports here we need to also add the ngx spinner components, and just make sure everything is happy inside here. Now we did make a change to our angular.json here to add the CSS, so to see this working we are going to need to go back to our client, and we're going to stop this, and we're going to run ngserve and let this restart. And if we've lined up all of our ducks in the correct row, then what we should see, if we go back to our browser, is loading spinners. And if I go back to the matches, loading spinner. If I go to a user, loading spinner. If I update my user and change something, we're going to see loading spinner. And every time we make an HTTP request, we now have that functionality. But what this does highlight to us is a sense of lots of loading for things that we've just requested. We're using computers. Surely we can remember stuff on a computer. And if I've got this user here and I click on this user, surely we can remember that. And we can. And we'll take a look at how we can deal with that next.